my Tuesday seminar. Today we have a very exciting seminar by two researchers from Fraunhofer Electronic Nano System. So we'll be having two speakers. The first is Dr. Mario Baum and Mr. Frank Rocher. So Mario received a combined MBE, Master of Business and Engineering, and PhD degree in Electrical Engineering and Microtechnologies at Chemnitz University of Technology. And his current and he joined this ENAS in 2002. And currently he's a team leader for the Integration Technologies research team. And today he's a deputy department head of the Department Systems Packaging in front of ENAS. And Frank received a diploma degree in Microtechnologies and Mechatronics from the Technical University of Chemnitz in 2010. And then since then he has worked in numerous research projects at Center for Microtechnologies, in TU Chemnitz, and then Fraunhofer Institute for ENAS. Now he leads the group of materials for MEMS within the Department of Systems Packaging. So without further ado, I'll introduce these two speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I will start. It's very nice to be here. So I'm Frank. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure, and we are quite lucky to be here the second time in Auckland. This time in another group we are visiting here in the university. I would like to start to explain a little bit the reason why we are here. So we are partnered up with Lincoln Agritech. It's a company down in Christchurch. I think 4 years ago in a so-called in Germany it's called a WTZ project. It's a cooperation that links companies and research bodies in Germany as well as in New Zealand to build up networks to get R&D and research closer together on both countries. Yeah? And we choose the topic on smart sensors for different application topics. Mainly the focus of the project was to explore applications in the field of smart farming, precision agriculture. So this is what we have done. And during the project, we visited different companies on both sides. I just want to give you a short insight here what we have done. So you see on the German side, we hosted a group of New Zealand researchers. We visited different universities, the University of Chemnitz, University of Freiberg, and also different private companies dealing with infrared technologies, sensors, or additive manufacturing technologies, or also fabrication, modern fabric fabrication with having sensors into fabrics. On the side of New Zealand, we have visited the University of Canterbury, of course Lincoln Agritech, people dealing with plastic production, injection molding, Gallagher LIC yesterday, shortly at the University of Auckland. So we are trying to connect with these groups to identify some overlap, to find topics for joint research projects. This is basically the idea. And I would like to give you a short introduction to Fraunhofer, so the research body I'm working with, and show some topics that our institute is dealing with, giving you a little bit wider overview. And later on, Mario will move to the topic of medical technologies we are working on. So Fraunhofer, for all of you, just to give you a brief overview, we say it's the largest organization for applied research in Europe, so we are kind of bridging the research that's coming out from universities and try to apply these applications together with contract research with industry. So we try to move the results that are coming out of the university, move this into industry. This is our aim, and overall in Germany, this is all the slide we now have, nowadays 71 or 72 institutes that are kind of independent and working on different topics. Like you can see here, it's ranging from production and supply, health and environment, up to energy and resources topics we are working on. And overall, there's a staff of around about 25,000 research members. Basically, we are paid 20% by the state, so this is a granted funding we have saved. And the other money we can apply for and earn with contract research with industry, or we apply for public grants coming out of Germany or European Union. So this is the business we are doing. The institutes all are situated in Germany. As you can see, the screen map here. So all those 72 institutes are located in Germany. But we have so-called project centers worldwide. So this is how Fraunhofer can partner up with overseas entities. So also with universities, for example. So this is then a model where we can work together overseas with companies or mainly universities. And of course, we have also subsidiaries or even so-called ICON projects. These are strategic projects from the Fraunhofer body or Gesellschaft to partner up with companies and especially universities overseas. So it's a model where there's one topic and both bodies work on the same topic and put on money from both sides. So Fraunhofer is putting on money and also the universities from the other side. So this could be also a model maybe where we can come together with Auckland University. So our institute, we have one project center directly linked to our institute in Sendai. This is north of Tokyo, where we work together with a university that is deeply into the microelectronic business. So some facts just for our institute. I don't want to stretch it too much. I think we can give you also the slides later on. We are a group of around about 170, 180 staff members, all in R&D. We have some overseas offices, and as mentioned, this project center in Japan. We are located in the eastern part. You see here, middle eastern part, the so-called state of Saxony. In Chemnitz, there's our headquarters, and we have a group sitting in Paderborn, so this is right now in the middle of Germany, and offices and activities in Berlin as we growed out of other institute that is basically situated in Berlin city. Our institute has the topic of micro and nano electronic systems. And this slide briefly shows what we are doing. So we have a silicon line available. That means we can do the MEMS and NEMS design, this micro electromechanical systems. Basically sensor products. This is our business, pressure sensors, accelerometers, inertial sensors, gyroscopes, or optical sensors. And we start from the development and design phase. We can go to the packaging of the components, we produce them. We can also do the testing, and we are working extensively in the reliability questions, for example, to fulfill reliability needs coming out of different industries like automotive or space industries. Newer topics are apart from silicon, so we have strong activities in printed functionalities. That means we do printing of conductive or insulating features in roll-to-roll printing processes, but also in sheet-level processes like screen printing, inkjet printing, cravo printing, aerosol jet printing, whatever. And I think Mario will also show some activities in polymers where we are working with microfluidic devices, especially for medical applications. Okay, same like here. I think the Fraunhofer Institute, and that is always the situation, is on a university campus, so closely linked to university. And like most campus, we also have kind of incubators and already grown-up companies where we are closely bonded and trying to manage together with them, to do projects together with them, to get products, ideas into industry. To give you some impression what applications we are doing. So one big field is inertial sensors, inertial macroelectromechanical systems. Here you see some examples. This is these are some SEM pictures how those sensors are looking. So it's basically structured and metallized silicon that has some movable parts. And with electronics, ASICs, we can read out those sensors and measure the environment. Yeah? And we are active in the area of accelerometers, vibration sensors, and gyroscopes. We have different technologies available, as mentioned, to fabricate those devices. And we use it, for example, for platform stabilization, like IMUs, gyro compasses for airplanes, aeronautic, or different applications. Apart from the inertial sensors, we are doing MEMS for opticals. Here you see a tunable public Haro interferometer. It's basically a miniaturized spectrometer in the infrared range. So this device is the size of a cubic centimeter and can scan through the wavelengths from 2 to 12 microns. and you can do, for example, breath analysis of patients under narcosis in this range, or you can do the detection of gases coming out of a fire burning. So people use it, for example, for to scan the area of interest in industry, and we have done this together with a company in Germany, and this is now a product like also the sensors you have seen before on the slide. Other topics are radio frequency MEMS switches. So we have mechanical switches designed, used for switching RF signals, quite reliable and much more let's say precise than the CMOS-based systems. We are working on acoustic MEMS. Here are some examples for ultrasonic transducers with membrane shapes here, which we are using for distance detection, or also in medical devices to bring energy into tissue. And other topics, and this is mostly the stream of all the systems we are doing, are autonomous sensor nodes. In this example you see here a system that is attached to an overhead power line to monitor the sag of the power line, depending on, for example, ice loading or wind situations. So this gives the guys who run the power lines the ability to check if a failure is, where it happens, because those things are communicating to each other and at the end to a base station, and you have all the values of your power lines to optimize that. The lab on chip technologies, I think I will skip. Mario will go into some details here. So this is non-silicon stuff, but we of course insert also silicon-based sensors to those things. I will hand it over to Mario, and just giving maybe some more ideas that I think could be interesting for you also. What we think is a topic of the future, so this is more, let's say, fundamental research in this stage, is going for degradable electronics for used in human bodies, but also in the environment. So we want to, let's say, have systems that can degrade in the human body after a certain time, but also can degrade in the environment, for example, in agriculture after a certain time. This is what we are working on. One example I show here. This is a fully printed field effect transistor based on OMUCEA. It's a special copolymer and shellac for insulation, and PSS for conducting features. And this is a fully printed electronic device that can go into the human body. You see, of course, we are quite far from this, but these are the first concepts here on the level we are having. This brings me to the focus of the printing technologies that we are using. So we started years ago with printing simple conductive tracks or antenna features for RFID or wireless other communication protocols, or RFID transponders. So that means we mounted later on RFID chips to this printed features, and nowadays we have, for example, flexible printed batteries that can be used in one-use systems. Or we have printed moisture sensors or other sensors that could be realized in printing. And as you can imagine, we can do this, for example, on roll-to-roll scenarios. So this is quite a low-cost approach to get sensors everywhere to realize this IoT thinking. And we think with combining those new printing technologies and also new materials, nanoparticle materials that we have in the printing world, and combine it with the conventional ICs, the semiconductors with the high performance, we can achieve low-cost systems with high performance in the future. So this is what we are working on, and we call this hybrid integration. One example here for such a hybrid integration is, for example, this substrate. What you can't see, it's transparent. It's an OMUCEA. We 3D print this OMUCEA with an inkjet technology in forms of lenses, for example, and then we bring on top conductive features and integrate conventional SMD components like these LEDs here to really have the flexibility also when we are using this digital manufacturing to have, let's say, individualized products for each and every person or needs in the industry. Going to another example, This is also some printed features. It's a 3D cap, so this is a slope here around about 1 centimeter in height, and you can see this is in silver printed on a 3D substrate, and the line width of those lines here is 150 microns. So nowadays printing technologies can also overprint 3D structures and bring some functionality to up-to-date, let's say, more or less passive parts of packaging, so we can function with those things. Also to give some other sparks maybe or ideas what could be from interest, we see the field of flexible or in the future also stretchable electronics as a relevant activity. So we are working here on the deposition processes for conductive and insulating materials. We have technologies available to do this from chip up to panel level, so there are different needs. We work on the testing for such flexible electronics or stretchable electronics. As mentioned, for example, when using printing technologies, we are already less or well below 100 microns in resolution to fabricate such devices. We are using nanoparticle-based inks, so we can also get to low temperature to process these materials when we talk about inks. And another example you see down here is the Parilene. I think the group showed us you're also working with Parilene for encapsulation. We use this to build freestanding Parilene membranes, and on top of the membranes there are conductive features that can be used for sensors. So it's ultra flexible membranes or devices we are working on. Okay, I think before I hand over to Mario, just another thing. It's also based basically on the Parilene. It's an RFID antenna. It's printed on a stretchable material. It's basically a TPU where we have an RFID chip mounted, and this is bonded together with conventional fabric. And so we have encapsulated the whole thing in a multi-layer Parilene setup to make it really washable. So these are also some things where we try to bridge the world or bring together the world of this printed electronics to conventional semiconductors, and also the encapsulation with new materials. So I think that's it to give you an overview of what we are doing, and Mario will go into some details for medical applications, I think, after 4 speakers. Discussion. Thank you.
Is there anything you don't do?
Almost. Yeah, we don't do in our institute CMOS, so we don't do IC. So silicon line is just used for sensors. We don't have implantation, for example. And naja.
Short list.
I mean, if you're looking to the sensor world, it's very diverse. Now we are, for example, not so active in power electronics. We are doing some packaging activities in power electronics, but the materials are different, the packaging is different, and also then the reliability is totally different. So there are other Fraunhofer institutes with a focus more on this level, or more different areas of application, let's say. So we don't do everything. We just try to make it look like.
Great, it's a pleasure. Maybe come back to your question if there is anything we cannot do. I think one of the main things is that we like to cooperate, and we also try to start things, even if we cannot do it by ourselves, to organize the partnerships and the networks to realize this kind of innovation, if I can tell this. I'm really happy to see that the room is completely filled. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for joining our seminar. And thank you for hosting us, even if this was a quite short-term invitation, I guess. Frank mentioned the background of our cooperation to Lincoln at the Tech. And as we heard that the Bioengineering Institute is hosting us, so I tried to collect some of the medical topics that we developed in common projects. You can see there are some of the colleagues of mine that are working with this within some of the projects, and also you can see some companies and some other institutes with a significant part of the developments. I will mention this on the right point of the presentation. So it's an honor for me to present some of these topics, and I'm open for questions at the end of the talk. As you could see from Frank's presentation, that there are two main areas. One is the silicon-based area, the MEMS and the NEMS, where we try to push this miniaturization and the functionalization of these sensor systems perfectly fitting the medical needs for implants. I think this is one of the points I would like to show with the first slide. The other area is the flexible electronics, or the flexible stuff he presented as the conductive paths, the printing technologies, and the flexible and stretchable substrates is mainly fitting the wearable stuff. We think that is necessary also in medical technology for patient monitoring, for sports, fitness, well-being. Maybe I come later to this point with some of the examples. But first, as you could see from this study picture, it's made from taken from a report created by Yole Development, a French company, who is doing this kind of reports in MEMS technologies, microsystem technologies. What you could see is the implants, and the idea behind that is to bring the sense back to the patients or back to the humans if they lost, or even to improve diseased people's senses. You can see also some of the chips and some of the sensors that are quite good commercialized and quite good developed. Actually, with the state of the art, as you could see, e.g. the hearing implants, even the microphones, and the digital sound processing around the hearing aids are quite well developed. Even the inertial systems are quite good developed for patient monitoring, but I think one open point is the balancing system inside the body to support the balanced feeling of the human beings. What is also quite well developed is maybe the implants for giving back the sight to the patients with the retina implants and some other stuff. The communication, I will come back to this point. I think there is some technological solution, but I think the adaptation in the medical field is not quite good. And even we have a conflict with miniaturization, but later to this point. I think one of the quite difficult topics are smell and taste, because it's kind of individual senses of each person, of each human being, and so it's not easy to simulate this or to rebuild this by a computational system. Speech, as far as we know, microphones with MEMS technologies and also micro speakers by using MEMS technologies are quite well developed. There are some big companies. If you look to your smartphone, then you will find several parts of this inside, but also working on implants by using this kind of miniaturized systems. Pressure sensor, we also talked about pressure a little bit with Simon before that seminar. It's quite interesting, but I think also this is a quite well commercialized product that can be used. I think in case of implants, it's always difficult to use off-the-shelf products. So it's quite often necessary to develop a quite perfect adapted system for an implant. And last but not least, the touch is quite an interesting stuff, because not only for medical reasons and for, let me say, prosthetics and human help, it's also for the whole industrial area of robotics. Quite interesting to bring the sense to the robotic hands. And also here, we are looking for sensors and for materials that can realize this in this certain area. Even if you have this hands, or if you have this sense or touch senses in the finger, it's not easy to grab a quite sensitive device, a glass or a fruit or something like this, by a robotic hand as well. So this is our motivation. And we try to focus some of the technologies that we are developing at the Institute to these areas. You can see this kind of overview where we have the implantable devices. I will introduce a research project. We already talked about before about this combination, a sensor fusion of a pressure sensor and acceleration sensor inside this small implant for hemodynamics monitoring system. The second, or the middle part, you can see medical equipment where we have some catheter-based activation devices by using miniaturized ultrasonic transducers, by using semiconductor technologies, and on the right-hand side you see some analytics and diagnostics where we do not use the silicon-based technologies but the polymer-based technologies and microfluidics. And I also mentioned next to this silicon-based stuff for implants, we also try to focus this flexible devices for wearables. And not going too deep into this fitness and well-being stuff, I would like to show you some results of a research project where we try to use this for medical application in the area of wound healing. And so we think that it's a quite interesting topic and focused by several researchers all over the world. As far as I know, there are some quite well-known groups in the United States and Japan, but also in Australia, working on that topic, getting some vital signs or some information from the patient by wearing these kind of bands, patches, plasters, something like this, getting communicated with mobile phones or something else. And we think this is an interesting topic for us to rebuild the skin with electronic functionality, call it eSkin. And so we try to establish also research projects in that field. But back to our project, as the idea is to create a medical plaster which have an electronic functionality with a stimulation of the cells by an electric field. It's called electrotaxy. And so we try to use our printing technologies on flexible substrates and to integrate it into this kind of patch that we bring onto patients that have chronic wounds based on diabetes patients or even other patients, where we try to accelerate the healing process by the electrical stimulation. There are some publications where you can find that the principle is working in general, that the cells are getting oriented by this kind of electric field stimulation, by this electrotaxy. And so the idea is to create a structure for different sizes of wounds. As you can see, we have some certain rings or some certain structures as a test demonstrator, where we print on these substrates and try to bring this healing or this healing process within up to 3 days or 4 days to a significant acceleration of the wound healing. That's the target, and so we're working together with a German-based company making the patches, and with the university based in Dresden, the Technical University in Dresden, on that topic. Some insights to the technology. As you can see, the electrode, the different colors are based on an insulation layer. That's why it's looking green. We have printed nano particle-based ink on that substrate by using screen printing technology. In that case, it's, as I mentioned, silver, and you can see the pads are opened and the rest of the structure is insulated. We do not get into contact with this structure as kind of a barrier. And you can see also the structure of this silver on the right-hand side. The next point is the result of simulation of this kind of electrode. You can see the electric field distribution by using this kind of electrode should be perfectly suited to the wound. And the idea of the printing is that we can have selective printing of the electrodes based on the individual shape of the wound. And this is maybe interesting and a perfect example of these printing technologies or the digital industrialization of this kind of product, we think. We come to the next example. Maybe you can also hear the sound in an emergency case. The idea is not to wait too long to help the patient that maybe have a heart failure. And so it's really necessary to be fast and to stay in contact with the patients under the monitoring of the ECG signals. That's the motivation of a project together with the company GTMed. It's also a German-based company, where we try to find perfect electrode material for long-time monitoring of the ECG signals of patients that may have arrhythmias. Because the problem is we need this long-term measurement to see also the small failures and the small arrhythmias in the heart performance of the patients. So, and as soon as we detect failures, so we can react, we can treat the patients better than if we would wait longer. I think it's usual, and it's a big market. And as you see from the state of the art, there are a lot of devices that can be used for this kind of long-term detection, long-term monitoring. I think I choose just a few examples from the company. As you can see, some different wireless ECG devices that you can press on your breast and monitor your signals. And up to date, a usual approach is having these 3 electrodes based on flexible materials, but these are standard electrodes, quite big contacts to this system, and in the middle you have a solid housing made of plastics that is not quite comfortable and not really suitable for long-term measurement of ECG in that case. If you look to American products, there are some first release products that are quite smaller, using only 2 electrodes. Might be suitable, but at the final end they are also not completely flexible, and they're also consisting of a solid housing in the middle of these electrodes. The question is, how can we improve this kind of measurement system, make it completely flexible? As you can see from the concept drawing, we'd like to use this kind of flexible electrodes by this kind of conductive paths, also by using some of these new materials for the electrodes on the substrates, and making this smaller, more comfortable for the patient. And even one of the challenges is the contact to the skin, and to avoid the skin irritation for the long-term monitoring. That's why we had this kind of project together with Australia, where we introduced this topic to the Australian, some partners, some universities, but also companies. And so we tried to find also partners for this substrate material, because, as I mentioned, it should be really fitted to the skin, should be flexible and stretchable like skin, should be really a second skin that is needed for carrying the electrodes and for detecting the signals that we need. And also one of the biggest problems in this wearable and medical technology is the battery, the energy supply that we have in that case for long-term ECG and for communicating the signals, bringing or providing the energy for all of that is one of the biggest challenges. And finally, this might be fitting the discussion we had before to the pressure sensor development that is done in Simon's group. So this is more or less a basic research project that is that could be done with different Fraunhofer institutes, just to create the cooperation structure between the institutes and also to use the competences of the different institutes, as you can see in some examples here. Our part in that project was to develop this small acceleration sensor that is almost 1 × 1 millimeter, as you can see from the surface, and you can see some of the contacts here, where we used the 2D acceleration measurement, X and Y, and this was made for acceleration measurement inside an implant. I will show you later the function of this implant. There were other activities in the project for us as institutes, so we also have the biocompatible thin film packaging. In that case, we used the Parilane that Frank also mentioned before, because we could not use a thicker and bigger titanium housing for this kind of sensor. Furthermore, we also used the so-called LTCC multilayer ceramic for the communication. We integrated coil for energy transfer, but also for data communication. And finally, we had a kind of super cap development to solving a little part of this energy problem, providing the implant with some energy. For that, we used this kind of nanopore structures, which was filled up with ionic liquid, and we tried to set up electric double layer conin or capacitor in that case. But to be honest, this as a basic research result, the performance was not as good as was expected. But back to the implant, as you could see here, we would like to monitor the heart and some of the heart failures with this kind of hemodynamic controlling system. So we had this kind of implant with a transmitting of information from inside the body, kind of an implantable sensor unit. Finally, the definition was to make it smaller than 3.5 × 15.5 millimeters squared, and so we wanted to integrate this pressure sensor, even the voltage impedance sensors for checking the hermetic sealing of the implant, but also temperature and acceleration sensor to stabilize the values of the pressure sensor. What we reached, you could see here, this is a photograph of the whole sensor system. These are the impedance sensors, as usual, only electrodes on top of the ceramics, some passives. This is an ASIC developed by another Fraunhofer institute called ENAS. This is the pressure sensor with the different membranes on top. As you can see, this is the only chip that is wire bonded to the ceramic substrate or the ceramic interposer. For the acceleration sensor and the ASIC, we used the flip chip bonding by using gold stud bumps. In that case, they're quite small and quite tiny, and working with different technologies and different metalizations. The sensor itself is made of so-called BDREI or IE technology, means bonding and deep reactive ion etching. That is the reason we can create the cavity and the movable sensor structure quite small and quite tiny structures to detect the movement in 2 directions, as I mentioned. And also we fabricated the MEMS prototypes, and the MEMS were characterized regarding the capacity and the frequency, as well as the sensitivity in the whole system, but also as on wafer level. Also with the packaging, the design and the simulation of the ceramic interposer was done by 2 of our institutes, but the fabrication was done by a Japanese supplier, which could fulfill the requirements of the minimum feature size of the wires and also the coil that you could see later in later picture, and also the bonding and the stud bump flip chip bonding could be demonstrated quite successfully. To give you some final insights to some research projects, I would like to mention quite shortly some other demonstrators, some other chips. I would like to call it innovation examples, but we have to show that there is innovation behind. This is an idea about catheter-based ultrasonic diagnosis and treatment system. That means we use these kind of semiconductor technologies to create tiny little membranes, and the membranes are activated and emit ultrasound. Based on the dimensions and the geometry of the membranes, we can adjust the frequency range of this ultrasound. And the idea together with the company is to have a kind of working channel where they can have this functionality, this usual functionality of an optical system, of an endoscope, together with the maybe diagnosing or even an activating functionality of the ultrasound microchip. The idea behind this is that we try to find or try to identify some cancer cells and treat the cancer by temperature, by heat. Depending on the results we will now reach with the prototypes, we have two possibilities. One is that we have this so-called hyperthermia, to kill the cancer cells by heat, or even if we have not enough energy that we can provide with the ultrasound transducer. So the idea is to have individual and quite localized treatment of the cancer by medical drugs. Because we can improve the metabolism of the cancer cells by the heat we bring in with the ultrasonic transducer. These two ideas were supported by the company and are called Polydiagnost, where we have this project also funded by a German government. And on the right lower side you can see an SEM image of the perilane. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the perilane. We try to use perilane not only as encapsulation layer and as well as a functional layer. In that case, you can see a silicon pillar, and we would like to show the homogeneity that is reached by this high precision deposition process. Yes, Frank mentioned also that we have some activities with polymer cartridges using microfluidics, and the idea behind this, again, the increasing functionality. We would like to reach a kind of actuation principle to bring the liquids into the reaction chambers by using kind of pump. Then we have some reaction chambers, some media chambers where we have cleaning agents, where we have reagents. And we have some sensitive locations where we integrated different kind of sensors. In that case, it's also a demonstrator. We have an ISFET, an electrical or an electronic sensor, but also an optical sensor, and also a kind of biosensor fluorescence detection of this of the different reaction, showing some of the let me say DNA and RNA analysis, but also protein analysis that is possible with this kind of cartridges. The idea behind is using cheap and not expensive materials for disposable systems and keeping the value or the electronics, as you can see from here in the second part, for reuse, this higher value components. Another example for this is a test cartridge for the Chagas disease that is mainly highly populated in Brazil. This was a European project together with also Brazilian companies and also Brazilian institutes, where we have this kind of point of care diagnostics regarding this one single disease, to have this kind of fast information to the patients. Also, Frank mentioned this filter, this optical filter that can be used for health applications. As you can see, food freshness, or even in medical applications, we try to use this kind of optical analysis, kind of non-invasive analysis for human liquids. For instance, also blood components like sodium concentration, but also albumin can be detected by this kind of optical setup. Not definitely with this kind of filter, but this is just an example of also integrating nano structures, photonic structures, as a kind of grading, kind of filter elements to this kind of wavelength ranges we need for this analysis. Yes, and also Frank mentioned this kind of flexible structures. You had seen the battery, which is unfortunately still a primary cell and not a rechargeable battery. But anyway, we're working on that. This is again the perilane I would like to show, but this is maybe also an interesting option for some research, because we try to pattern the surface of different materials. First we started with silicon, and also we try to use glass for this kind of topographic structuring, patterning of these surfaces to detect and investigate the behavior of different cells. The idea behind was, if we have some optical detection principles, some optical sensors as a kind of an implant, we always have the problem of biofilms and of encapsulation of the implant. And so it was an idea to look for a certain surface where maybe the cells and the biofilm is not growing. The literature is showing that there is a certain threshold for the dimension of such structures, but we could not really show that we have the right structures to avoid cell growth, or to avoid, or to push cell growth on this stuff. But I would like to show, I think it's a nice example to use nanotechnology for creating the right surface for biological interfaces. Yes, and I would like to conclude this talk, which, in my opinion, I think the ongoing miniaturization will lead to innovative and new products, especially also in medical technology. Our main topic, the high-performance MEMS, will also generate a high potential for medical applications, whether it's implant or it's wearable. One of the main topics is to decrease the cost of the patient or the medical system. I think in Germany this is one of the hottest topics, how to deal with the high costs for patient treatment. And so I think if you use this kind of innovative system for decreasing the cost and for personalized treatment, personalized diagnosis, we would like to have maybe a chance to commercialize these developments in the next 5 to 10 years. And of course, both of us, we are from the packaging department, so I think also the packaging technology is quite important for implants as well. And we think maybe there's no need to have these big titanium or ceramic packages if we think about some new combinations of thin film layers, maybe parallel, maybe in combination with other materials. So I would like to close this talk and open the talk for questions. If there are any ideas we would like to support, we would like to offer our capabilities to all of your scientific projects, and maybe we could find a potential idea for cooperating together. Thank you very much.
So much for this wonderful talk that gave us how the future of healthcare will look like. Yeah. Any questions from the floor?
I'm curious about the performance of your encapsulation of your accelerometer and pressure sensor. You didn't show it encapsulated, but you did sort of have a diagram of...
I just mentioned the idea, right?
Yeah.
It's a good question. So we did not test the whole system with a layer combination, but we had a test setup by using a so-called calcium, what is the English name? I think it's a kind of hermetic sealing test where you have calcium, and the reaction under oxygen or humidity is simply to detect by color change. And so we use this parylene in combination with a thin film layer of aluminum oxide deposited by atomic layer deposition, ALD, and then we have this kind of sandwich structure by parylene, ALD, and parylene to protect this thin, 50 nanometer thin aluminum oxide layer. And this was maybe one of the interesting points, that we have this quite thin, 50 nanometer thin layer, which increases the hermeticity, or the hermeticity of parylene to a significant number. The calcium was not changing the color, so it was really hermetically sealed within this test. The problem I could not show, because this was another project, another cooperation with another institute which created this test, and so I could not show the results within that project. But we think it's really promising. I think in case of maybe efficiency or cost effectiveness, we think about these two processes, but I think they are not really cheap and they're not really fast. I think parylene is quite a long process, and ALD is also quite a long process. So we are still under investigation of this kind of also mechanical stability, because we think it's still quite sensitive.
Thank you for your talk. Really cool stuff. You showed, I think, in one of your images, something that looked like a capacitive force sensor. Do you also do work in electrostatic or piezoelectric actuation for medical devices?
I think I could not say yes with all the combinations. I think yes, partly yes, because I think many of the sensors I showed, or even Frank showed, is based on a capacitive principle. And the actuation is the same. I showed the ultrasonic transducer. It's a CMOT, it's a capacitive working principle. The CMOT is also made for some medical applications, of course. And also there are another application coming up with this kind of CMOT, because there are some drawbacks because of the high voltage you have to apply it to keep it excited and to keep it in frequency, is a so-called PMOT by using piezoelectric thin film layers. There's a technology by using aluminum nitride we use for kind of activation of these membranes, but not only the membranes. I did not show the examples of micromirrors, where we have this kind of actuation of a mirror plate by using this aluminum nitride as a kind of thin film layer. Yeah.
You mentioned several times the use of parylene
Yes.
to provide a flexible or bendable electronics or sensing systems. Do you see a need for similar devices that are both bendable and stretchable? And have you any projects in that area?
Exactly, the stretchable part of this idea is the open point, where we are also looking for substrates. We have some ideas looking for silicones or some other stuff, but the problem is the combination of the printing technologies and also some other deposition technologies. The parylene is one of the base technologies or base material where we can easily, I don't like more easily, I'm sorry, where we can combine the semiconductor-like or wafer-based technologies with this kind of flexible substrate by using a sacrificial layer. So that means we are using a wafer, can handle the rigid wafer, a silicon wafer, having the parylene on top, and can handle this kind of system by printing, by depositing, by sputtering, as you can see, etching. So it's almost compatible with all the semiconductor processes. And after that, we can take this parylene down from the wafer and have this kind of flexible system. But you're absolutely right, it's not really stretchable. The properties of parylene are not really like silicone or rubber or something like this, what would be needed for a kind of skin-like variable. That's right, no, that's the open point. But we could show with the parylene, maybe one of the first steps, that we can use also this kind of metallization processes coming from semiconductor technologies. Yes, sure.
You mentioned, I think, near the start of your talk about biodegradable electronics.
Mm-hmm.
Have you also done any work in, let's say, ingestible electronics, stuff that you can swallow that might be, I mean, stuff both that passes through your system, but also stuff that might be dissolved in the stomach? Is that an area that you...
Not yet. But we think this might be even rare. It's maybe to be degraded. We think this is a hot topic maybe for next generation of implants or even sensor systems. I think in medical field you find some more, I think, a better state of the art for this kind of degradable materials. But I don't know if they are really digestible. I don't know. It's an open field. But even in case of other environmental sensors or even agriculture sensors, I think it's really interesting to have such degradable systems where you won't have any effect to the environment. Maybe Frank, you can add something?
Maybe to comment just from the agricultural point, that there are implants and also parts that can be swallowed are quite common. So they stay in the stomach for quite a long time. They call it bolus. So maybe if you have need some ideas, you can also look what they have done in their areas. But they are not really degradable because they want them to stay there several months.
I have another question.
Sure.
Your highly integrated microfluidics examples were pretty impressive. I do wonder what they cost. What was this sort of...
Oh, no. This is one point I forget to ask my colleagues, but I know that there are some cartridges that they really purchase or that they really sell, because there's one of the startup stories. We also can tell that the microfluidics group has established a little company, an SME company next to university and next to Fraunhofer that is fabricating these kind of cartridges by using different sensors or different assays together with another biological institute. I think we can get some costs, but actually I do not have that in mind. But I'm sure I can send you an email with that information. And I can connect it to the company. It's called Biflow Systems. Yeah, so it's even the same. Maybe it's also an overlap to the story you told before about the PDMS idea and the laser structuring. I think there are similar technologies and similar approaches. We also run this prototyping by using laser technology, by using a picosecond laser to create these structures quite fast and quite ready to prototyping. Yeah. I take this interest and send you the information about the cartridges. I think this is also, we had the discussion about the medical approval and the medical certification that we struggle in Europe or struggle in Germany quite heavily these times, because from next year there's a new regulation, the medical device regulation, and so all the companies, and especially the small and medium-sized companies, struggle with this kind of approval. It's almost, I would say, from my point of view, it's almost impossible to start a new development of a medical product by SME, because they could not really do all the required jobs and could not take the costs that are combined with this task to create new medical products. So it's quite a difficult situation in Germany, also for the institutes. But the company Biflow has the same idea or the same problem that they would like to have this as a kind of point of care diagnostic tool, but it's really expensive and really high effort to get the approval for human beings or human treatment. So they also try to go the second way, maybe for animal treatment, because it's much more easier to get approval for even animal diagnostics. And this is again a bridge to the agriculture and to the farming community, where we can say there's some stuff like milk testing, some stuff like DNA testing, which we think might come up also for the whole farming area.
Well, if there is no more questions, then let's close the seminar, and thank again Frank and Mario for their wonderful talk today.